everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Cala Patterns and welcome to video 3 for the Delphinium Hobo bag. We're going to assemble the second exterior panel of our bag, the one that has the 2 zipper pockets. So you're going to need the following pieces. You're going to need your 2 zippers. So I'm making the small size, so these are my 14-inch zippers. If you're making the large, they'll be 16 inches. And then you're going to need the 3 exterior pieces. So the top zipper panel, the top zipper panel, the middle zipper panel, and the lower zipper panel. And then you're going to need the 4 exterior slip pocket lining pieces. So before we do anything, we're going to mark our centers. So if you take your zippers, and they should be 14 inches, which means that the center is going to be at the 7-inch mark. And I make a mark along the top and the bottom, and I do that for both. Okay. Then for the lining pieces, I want you only need to mark the centers on the top. So fold them in half, wrong sides together, and mark the top center on all 4 pieces. Sorry, this is a bit boring, watching me mark centers. Now for the exterior pieces, I want the center marks to be on the wrong side, not the right side. So you're going to fold them in half, right sides together, and then mark the center. So the middle piece, I'm marking it along the top and the bottom. The top piece, I think just to be safe, we can mark it on the top and the bottom, but you really only need it on along the bottom edge for this piece. Okay, so we're going to start by taking one of the lining pieces. Okay, and lay it on your work surface right side up. And then take one of your zippers, doesn't matter which one, and center it. So make sure your center marks are lined up. And okay, I'm gonna go get my pin cushion. I'll be right back. Okay, so what we're gonna do in the next couple of steps is we're going to attach, to each zipper, we're going to attach 2 of the lining pieces. So you just lay your one lining piece right side facing up, and then place your zipper along the top edge and make sure the center marks are aligned. Your zipper should also be right side facing up. And you can tape it or glue it or pin it in place, whichever method you prefer. I just usually use pins. And then I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew the zipper to the lining piece with 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so the zipper has been sewn to the lining piece, and now I'm just going to press the lining piece away from the zipper. Okay, then I'm going to repeat the same step to attach a second lining piece. Again, just lining up my center marks. And then again, I'm just going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew this lining piece in place with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so the second piece is sewn to the zipper now. Again, I'm just going to press the lining piece away from the zipper. I'm going to need to add some water in my iron. It's not producing steam. Okay, so here are the 2 lining pieces attached to one zipper. Now I want you to repeat exactly the same steps that we did to attach these 2 lining pieces to the remaining zipper. Okay, so you should now have 2 zippers with 2 lining pieces attached. You can set aside one of the zippers for now and place one of the zippers with attached lining pieces right side up, and I want you to take the top one and just flip it so that it's facing downward, and then take your top zipper panel and you want to place it over top with the wrong side facing up, and you want if you're using a directional print, so you're going to want it to flip it so it's upside down. And now I'm going to use clips instead of pins. And you start again by lining up those center marks and then pin it along that top edge. Now it's not going to be the full width, that's exactly what you want. Okay, now make sure that you're using the correct seam allowance and sew all of the layers together. So you should have 1 lining layer, 1 zipper layer, 1 exterior piece layer. You're going to sew all of this together with 1/4 inch seam allowance. The top zipper panel is sewn to the zipper in 1 lining piece. Now I'm just going to flip it so that it's facing upwards. And then I'm going to press the panel away from the zipper. Now you're only pressing the exterior piece, the lining piece is still facing down. Okay, and then once you've pressed it, you're going to go over to your machine and you're just going to top stitch here along this, the seam allowance along the top edge of the zipper. You're leaving these 2 layers facing downwards. Okay, so I've top stitched here. Now you're going to take this and you're going to flip both lining pieces so now they're facing upwards, and flatten your zipper down. And you're going to take your middle zipper panel and you're going to place it along this bottom edge of your zipper, making sure that in this step here, so you're going to want to make sure that when you flip it this way that your print is facing the right direction if you're using a directional print. But you're going to place it like this, line up your center marks, pin in place. My zipper pull is a little bit in the way here. Okay, and then you're going to go and sew along this side of the zipper with 1/4 inch seam allowance. So then after, when you flip it, it's going to look like this. Okay, so this is sewn together now. What I'm going to do is I'm not just going to flip this panel downwards. I'm going to reach underneath and grab this lining piece and also press both down. I don't know why, but my iron is not steaming. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it over and press this away. Flip this over and try this again since it wasn't pressing. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to top stitch, and this time I'm top stitching both the middle zipper panel and this lining piece away from the zipper. Okay, so I now have the top zipper panel, middle zipper panel attached to this one zipper with the two lining pieces, and there's top stitching along the bottom and the top and the bottom edges. Now you're going to take your second set of zipper pieces with the two lining pieces, place them on your work surface, and you want your zipper pull to be on the left, and you have your both of your lining pieces are facing downwards. Then we're going to take this piece and we're just going to grab the edge of the middle zipper panel and we're going to flip it. Now here you'll note you'll have the zipper pulls on the same side, and you're going to line up the center marks and clip them together. I left the clip somewhere. Here they are. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to the machine. I'm going to sew these together with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've now attached the bottom edge of the middle zipper panel to the top edge of this zipper. So now I'm just going to flip everything so that I can see my exterior pieces. And then the two lining pieces that are attached to the top zipper, I want those, both of them, to be pointing upwards. And the two lining pieces attached to this bottom zipper, I want both of them to be facing downwards. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to press the middle zipper panel away from the zipper. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to top stitch along this edge. Okay, so we have top zipper, two lining pieces, top zipper panel, middle zipper panel, and then two lining pieces here. So now we're just going to attach the lower zipper panel, which is the last piece we need to attach. What you're going to do is, again, you're going to have these pointing upwards. So now all four lining pieces are pointing towards the top zipper panel. And you're going to take the lower zipper panel, flip it so it's upside down, line up the center marks, and clip it in place. Okay, and then again, you're going to sew this in place with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so the lower zipper panel is attached to the zipper. Flip it so it's pointing downwards. Now your bag should look something like this. And then I want you to flip it over and take only the very bottom lining piece and also have that pointing down. Now press both of these away from the zipper. turn it over. Also press this away and press. Okay, and go over to your machine and top stitch the seam allowance along this bottom edge of the zipper. Okay, so now I've just top stitched this seam allowance. Turn everything over and have all of your lining pieces pointing downwards. Okay. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to sew the bottom edges of our lining pieces together. So you're sewing these two together and the bottom two together. Now you're going to notice that they're not exactly the same length, so they don't meet perfectly at the bottom. That's okay. So flatten your lining pieces and just pin these top two together like so. I'm going to move my iron out of the way so I don't burn myself. Okay, and then move those out of the way and do the same for the bottom too. Okay, now make sure you're not pinning any of the exterior pieces, you're just pinning your two lining pieces together. Okay, so the two bottom pieces, you're going to notice that they're just a tad bit longer than your bottom piece. Okay. So what you want to do is when you're sewing them together, make sure that you sew high enough that you're going to be above the bottom edge of this lower zipper panel. Okay, and then you're going to go over to your machine and you're going to sew these two together along the bottom, and then you're going to sew these two along the bottom. And again, just make sure for these bottom ones that you're sewing above the bottom edge of your lower panel. Okay, so the bottom edges are sewn together. I'm just going to take my pins off. And then I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and I'm just going to trim away some of the excess lining at the bottom here. Make sure you're not cutting any of your exterior pieces, only the lining pieces. Okay, and then turn it over. Now make sure that your pulls are on the inside. So I don't want your pulls anywhere near the exterior. And you need your pattern piece, which I have set aside. And I cannot find. Okay, I'm going to pause the video, find my pattern piece, and then we're going to come and trim the exterior here. Okay, so I've completely lost my pattern piece. I have no idea where it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other exterior panel and I'm going to use this as my cutting guide. So place them right sides together. And I don't really like to do this part with a rotary cutter because there's too much room for error. So what I'm going to do actually is just draw the outline where I'm going to cut. And I'm going to use a very sharp pair of scissors to do the cutting. That's just my iron turning off. Okay, do the same on this side. Cannot see the pen. That's not going to work. And then I want to make sure that that top line is very straight. So I'm going to use a ruler. Okay, so unfortunately I'm using something dark, so you're not going to see the outline that I drew. Now, before I cut this out, I'm actually going to go and run a basting stitch. Not so much along the top, it's not necessary, but here along the edges and all the way around the curved edge, because I want everything to my lining pieces to stay nice and flat, and I also want to close the opening here of my zippers so I don't accidentally take off one of my zipper pulls. So I'm going to just put in a few pins so everything stays put. And then I'll do that basting stitch, and then I'll be able to trim all my layers and not have to worry about anything shifting while I'm cutting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the basting stitch, and then I'm going to trim the exterior. Okay, so I did my basting stitch, and then I went ahead and I trimmed away the excess. This is what it'll look like from the back. And now you should have two fully functional zipper pockets. And you have two matching panels. So what we want to do now is we want to attach these two panels to our exterior gusset. So I'm going to get the gusset. Now for the gusset, we already have a center mark. That is where we have that middle seam. For these, we have a center mark already on this panel. We have that where the line of stitching where we separated the two slip pockets. That's our center. And then earlier when I was marking centers, I went ahead and I marked the bottom center on this panel. So now what we are going to do is attach these. I'm just going to pause and get my clips ready to do the clipping. Okay, so I've found my clips and I've started clipping the gusset to the first exterior piece. And when you're clipping, what you want to do is, I like to clip with the panel, the exterior panel facing up. And then I start by clipping the centers at the bottom. So the center seam in the gusset to that bottom center seam on that exterior panel. And then I clip the top corners. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip this one. And then I start clipping everything in between. Now you're going to notice that it's a bit of a tight fit clipping this to the gusset, and I do that on purpose because I don't want puckers in the gusset. So you might notice that when you get to the corner, it kind of does something like this. That's what I want. Sometimes it's helpful to actually clip this panel here a tiny bit into the seam allowance to get it to fit to the curve nicely. Okay, and don't be shy, use a lot of clips, and you're going to find that you'll make less errors when you're sewing them together if you go ahead and you use a lot of clips. I know it takes a little bit extra time, but it's worth it. Okay, so that's fully clipped together now, and I'm going to go over to my machine and sew it. I have some testers like to sew this side facing up, some like to sew this side facing up. It's really personal preference. Try it one way, and if you don't like it, you can always try it the other way and see which way you prefer. So I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew these together all the way around. Make sure that you're back stitching at the top corners. Okay, so these are sewn together now. And now there's an optional step that you can do. It is a bit tricky to do, so if you're not 100% comfortable, you don't have to do it. But if you like, you can actually top stitch this seam allowance. And I'm going to grab my sample bag so that I can show you what it looks like. Okay, and again, it's completely optional. You don't have to do it if you're not comfortable doing it. It can be tricky, especially on the second panel. So let me just grab this. Hopefully you can see. So you can see it here maybe, that I've top stitched the seam allowance after I've attached each panel. It's not so bad to do it on the first one, but when you get to the second one, it can be a little bit trickier. So if that's something that you're not interested in trying, you can completely just omit it. You don't have to do it. I like the top stitching, so I'm actually going to go ahead and do that now. And then I'm just going to repeat all of these steps, and I'm going to attach this remaining exterior panel to the other side of the gusset. Okay, so I have the 2 exterior panels attached to the gusset, and I did go ahead and I did do the top stitching. I'm not sure if you can see. Hopefully you can see this. So now I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to move on to the next video where we do our lining assembly.